The nausea hit her at 6:47 in the morning, right when she was supposed to be scrubbing in for her first surgery of the day. Adira pressed her back against the cold tile wall of the hospital restroom and breathed through her nose. Slow. Steady. The fluorescent light buzzed above her head like it always did, like it had been doing for the 3 years she'd worked at Mercy General. And she focused on that sound until the wave passed. She looked down at the test in her hand. 2 lines. She'd taken 4 of them over the past week, each one from a different pharmacy, as if changing the brand would change the answer. They all said the same thing. She was 31 years old. She was the youngest attending surgeon in the cardiothoracic unit at Mercy General Hospital in Atlanta. She had logged more than 4,000 hours in the OR since her residency. She had held a man's beating heart in her hands and kept him alive. And right now, standing in the 3rd stall of the women's restroom on the 4th floor, she felt like she was 19 and terrified and completely, utterly alone. She folded the test into a paper towel and buried it at the bottom of the trash can. Then she washed her hands twice, straightened her white coat, and walked out to save someone else's life. She and Hayden had been married for 2 years, together for 4. They met at a charity gala. He was a corporate attorney, the kind who wore cufflinks without irony and knew the name of every sommelier in Midtown. Adira's mother had called him a catch from the very first dinner. Her father had shaken his hand too hard and smiled too wide, the way he did whenever he was trying to convince himself of something. The wedding was at a vineyard outside Savannah. 200 guests. Her dress had a 12-foot train. Adira cried at the altar, which surprised her, because she wasn't someone who cried easily. She had believed, genuinely believed, that she was the luckiest woman in that room. That was before she knew what he was doing on the nights she was on call. She didn't tell Hayden about the pregnancy right away. She told herself she was waiting for the right moment. A quiet evening, dinner at home, candles maybe. Something that felt like an occasion. But the truth was she kept coming home to an empty apartment. He was always working late. Always a dinner with clients, a conference call that ran long, a thing he couldn't get out of. She ate cereal standing at the kitchen counter most nights and went to bed before he got home. On a Tuesday in October, she came off a 14-hour shift and found him already there for once, sitting on the couch with his laptop open. She stood in the doorway with her coat still on and her bag still on her shoulder, and he looked up at her and she thought, "Now, Hayden," she said, "I need to tell you something." He glanced back at his screen. "Give me 5 minutes, I'm in the middle of something." She waited 23, she counted. When he finally closed the laptop, she sat down next to him on the couch and put the ultrasound photo on the coffee table between them. It was from her appointment 2 days before, just a blur of gray and white, a shape that looked more like a question mark than anything else. He stared at it for a long moment. "Is that?" "Yeah," she said. He didn't say anything for what felt like a very long time. Then he put his arm around her and pulled her close, and he said, okay, we've got this." And he kissed the top of her head, and Adira closed her eyes and exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. She wanted so badly to believe him. The first sign was small enough that she almost missed it. His phone, face down on the bathroom counter. Always face down now, which it never used to be. She noticed it the way you notice a picture slightly crooked on a wall. Something in the back of your brain registers it even when you tell yourself it doesn't matter. She didn't say anything. She was 12 weeks along and exhausted, and she had a triple bypass scheduled for Thursday morning. And she did not have the bandwidth to be that woman, the suspicious wife who checked her husband's phone. She wasn't that woman, she kept telling herself that. The day she found out was a Saturday. She had the day off, rare enough that she'd written it on the kitchen calendar with a star next to it. She'd planned to sleep until 9, go to the farmer's market on Peachtree, maybe finally paint the nursery the pale sage green she'd been looking at samples of for 3 weeks. But she woke up at 6 because her body didn't know how to sleep late anymore. And she lay there in the quiet for a while, and then she got up and decided to bring Hayden coffee in bed the way she used to, back at the beginning of things when they were still learning each other. He wasn't there. His side of the bed was cold. His car was gone from the garage. His phone went straight to voicemail. She stood in the kitchen holding 2 mugs and told herself there was an explanation, a client emergency, something he forgot to mention. She was a reasonable person. She did not jump to conclusions. She called his office line out of habit. No answer, which made sense. It was Saturday. Then she called the main reception desk on instinct, and the woman who answered said, "Oh, Mr. Hayden left something here yesterday. Do you want me to leave a message?" Adira said yes. And then she said, "Was he in late last night?" "I couldn't reach him." The woman paused just a half second too long. "I actually don't track attorney hours. I'm just covering the front desk." That pause, that half second, it sat in her chest like a stone. She didn't go to the farmer's market. She sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet and both hands over her stomach, and she breathed. And she thought about all the face-down phones and the late nights and the dinners that ran long, and she tried very hard not to know what she already knew. She found out the truth 11 days later, and she found out the way nobody should ever find out anything, by accident, in public, in front of people, at the worst possible moment. She was at the hospital. It was a Wednesday and she'd come in early for a pre-op consult, and she was crossing the main lobby on her way to the elevator when she saw him. Hayden, at Mercy General. He was walking through the front entrance with his hand on the lower back of a woman Adira did not recognize at first. And then she did, because she'd seen her face in a photo on Hayden's phone 3 months ago. A photo he'd quickly closed when she walked into the room. He'd said it was a colleague, a paralegal at the firm. Her name was Brianna. She was young, maybe 26. She had long dark hair and a white maxi dress, and she was very visibly, unmistakably pregnant. Hayden was guiding her through the door with both hands now, one at her back and one reaching forward to hold the door open, leaning close to say something in her ear that made her smile. He had never once looked at Adira that way in a hospital. She was the one who worked here. He'd visited her exactly twice in 3 years, both times when she'd had to skip events he wanted her to attend. Adira's ultrasound photo was in her coat pocket. She had brought it to show him that evening. She'd made a reservation. She was going to tell him the sex. She stood in the middle of the lobby and the world continued around her. Nurses in scrubs, a man in a wheelchair, a child eating a granola bar, and none of it registered. Just him. Just that woman. Just the way his hand rested on her back like she was something precious. The ultrasound photo felt like it was burning through her coat. She didn't call out to him. She didn't move. She stood there until they turned toward the elevator, and then she walked, very calmly, very deliberately, to the stairwell, pushed through the door, and sat down on the 3rd step and put her face in her hands. A resident found her there 4 minutes later and asked if she was all right. "I'm fine," she said, the way she always said it. "I just needed a minute." She didn't confront Hayden that night. She went home before him, made dinner she didn't eat, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the centerpiece, a succulent he'd given her for their first anniversary, until she heard his key in the lock. He came in loosening his tie, said, "Hey, how was your day?" and opened the refrigerator. She watched him. "Hayden," she said, "where were you this afternoon?" He turned with a container of leftovers in his hand. "Office, why? You were at Mercy General." A pause. Not long, a professional pause, the kind she imagined he'd practiced in depositions. "I stopped in to see a colleague. It's not a big deal. She's pregnant." The container went back on the shelf. He closed the refrigerator. When he turned to face her, his expression had shifted into something careful and controlled, and she recognized it as the face he wore in negotiations, when he was deciding how much to give up. "Adira, how long?" Not a question, he understood the difference. It's complicated. It's not what you think." "How long, Hayden?" He looked at the floor. "About a year." The succulent sat between them on the table. She had kept it alive for 2 years, through 3 apartment moves and a brutal summer and all her long nights away. She was, it turned out, better at keeping things alive than she'd thought. "You need to leave," she said. "Tonight," she said. "Right now. Please." He left. She sat at the table for a long time after. Then she got up, washed the dishes, and went to bed, because she had a surgery at 7 in the morning, and her patient needed her steady hands. She did not cry until the next day, in the car, alone at a red light on Piedmont Avenue, and then she cried so hard she had to pull over. The divorce paperwork was filed within the month. Hayden didn't fight it. She suspected he was relieved, which was its own particular kind of wound. He moved out and found somewhere new to be, and disappeared into a version of his life that no longer included her. Her mother called every day for 2 weeks. Her dad drove up from Macon with a casserole and sat in her living room and didn't say much, just turned the TV on and watched baseball beside her, and that was somehow exactly right. She leaned her head on his shoulder at some point, and he put his arm around her and didn't make it into a conversation, which was the best thing anyone did for her in those weeks. She told her colleagues she and Hayden had separated. She told them it was mutual. She didn't tell anyone the rest. What she didn't expect, what she had no framework for, was the question of the baby. She lay awake many nights working through it. She was a surgeon. She was alone. She was 20 weeks pregnant. She had a mother who would help and a father who would show up in a job she loved, and she knew someone who could figure things out. She had always been someone who figured things out. She was keeping this baby. That part she was clear on, even when everything else was fog. Ezra came back into her life in November, which was either terrible timing or the only kind of timing that could have worked. They had been close in medical school, study partners first, then actual friends, the kind where you know each other's coffee orders and family drama, an exact level of exhaustion by the set of the other person's shoulders. He'd gone into orthopedic surgery. They'd lost touch the way people do when life accelerates past the speed at which friendships can coast. He texted her out of nowhere. Hey, I heard you're at Mercy General now. I'm joining the ortho team in December. Small world. She stared at the text for a long time. Small world, she wrote back. Coffee sometime? He showed up 2 weeks later on a Thursday afternoon and found her in the hospital cafeteria stress eating a blueberry muffin over a stack of patient files. He sat down across from her without asking and stole the other half of the muffin and said, You look exhausted. Nice to see you too, she said. He looked at her the way he always had, directly, without any performance of politeness. You okay? And I mean actually, not like professionally okay. She opened her mouth to say I'm fine. She said, not especially, no. She didn't tell him everything that day, but she told him enough, and he listened the way she'd forgotten people could listen, without immediately trying to fix it, without pivoting to his own story, without checking his phone. He just listened. When she stopped talking, he said, That's a lot to carry by yourself. I'm good at carrying things, she said. I know, he said. That's not a compliment. She didn't know when she started looking for him in the hallways. It happened gradually, the way most significant things do. Not a moment, but a pattern, accumulated over weeks. She'd round a corner and find herself noting whether his broad-shouldered frame was somewhere in her sightline. She'd check her phone between procedures and feel something lift when she saw his name. She told herself it was just friendship, comfort. She was going through a hard time and he was familiar and kind. She told herself that for approximately 6 weeks before she stopped believing it. What she knew about Ezra. He brought coffee to the night nurses without being asked. He had a laugh that surprised you, big and unhesitant, like he hadn't learned to be embarrassed by it yet. He'd once spent 40 minutes helping an elderly patient's husband navigate the hospital parking app because the man was flustered and Ezra happened to be walking by. He never mentioned it afterward. He also never pushed, never assumed. He showed up. At the cafeteria outside the OR when she had a hard case, at her car once when she was leaving late and the parking garage felt large and dark, and he was just there, steady and uncomplicated in a way that felt, after everything, like water. One evening in January, he walked her to her car, and they stood in the cold for too long, not quite finishing the conversation, neither of them moving to leave. His breath fogged in the air between them. Adira, he said in the tone of someone about to say something careful. Don't, she said, not harshly, just honestly. He nodded. Okay, I'm not there yet. I don't know if I'm going to get there. I'm having this baby in 3 months and I'm doing it alone and I'm barely. She stopped, started again. I don't want to say something to you that I can't take back. He was quiet for a moment. That's fair. You should probably find someone who has their life together. Probably, he agreed. Then I'm not in any hurry. She looked at him. I'll be here, he said simply. That's all. No expectations. Just, I'll be here. She drove home thinking about that. She thought about it for a long time. Her daughter was born on a Tuesday morning in April, at 6:18 a.m., at the same hospital where Adira had delivered hundreds of other people's children into the world. She named her Iris. Her mom was in the room, holding her hand so hard Adira's fingers went numb, crying and trying to pretend she wasn't. Her dad paced the hallway for 4 hours and ate 3 bags of vending machine pretzels and came in afterward with red eyes and said, She looks exactly like you did, which made Adira laugh even though she was barely conscious. Ezra sent a text at 7:02 a.m. I heard. She's beautiful, you did it. She didn't know how he knew already. Later she found out he'd been on shift all night and had quietly checked the board around 4 in the morning. She'd been carrying that information for a few months before she let herself feel all of it. Iris was 3 tells old when Adira came back to work. It was harder than she'd expected. Not the medicine, that she could still do in her sleep, but leaving that tiny face every morning, handing her to her mother who'd come to stay, walking through the hospital doors and becoming Dr. Adira Cole again instead of just Iris's mom. There was a seam between those two selves that she hadn't anticipated. Ezra left a coffee on her desk the first morning back. No note. Just the coffee, exactly how she took it, from the good place 3 blocks from the hospital, not the cafeteria. She sat down in her office and looked at it for a moment, and something shifted in her chest, quietly the way tectonic things move. Not dramatic, just a slow settling into place. She texted him, the good place, you absolute menace. He texted back, welcome back. She smiled and then she put her phone down and went to save someone's life. They had dinner for the first time in June. A real dinner, not the cafeteria, not takeout eaten between shifts. She found a sitter, she wore a dress. He showed up with flowers and looked slightly nervous in a way that she found unbearably endearing. They talked for 3 hours. She told him things she hadn't told anyone. About the night she found Hayden at the hospital, about sitting on the stairwell floor, about the red light on Piedmont Avenue, where she'd pulled over to cry. He didn't try to reframe it or find the silver lining. He just said, that must have been an incredibly lonely thing to go through. It was exactly the right thing to say. At the end of the night, standing on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, he kissed her. careful and unhurried, like a question rather than an assumption. She kissed him back. I should tell you, she said afterward, that I come with significant complications. I know, he said. I've read your chart. She laughed so hard the people walking past turned to look. It felt like something loosening, some long-held tension finally releasing from somewhere deep in her sternum. Iris said Ezra before she said Mama. This became the most repeated story at every family dinner for years, told by Adira's mother with increasing dramatic embellishment and always at maximum volume. He proposed on a Sunday morning in Adira's kitchen, which was where the most important things in her life had happened. The late nights, the cereal at the counter, the sitting on the floor. He didn't get down on one knee. He just slid the ring across the breakfast table while she was reading and said, I thought about doing something elaborate. Then I thought you'd hate that. I would have hated that, she confirmed. She looked at the ring. Simple, elegant, exactly her. She looked at him. Yes, she said. Obviously yes. Iris from her high chair banged her spoon on her tray 3 times in a row, which they chose to interpret as approval. The wedding was small, 40 people. Adira's parents in the front row, her mom gripping her dad's arm and crying before the ceremony even started. Ezra's family filling the other side, warm and loud in a way that had taken her some getting used to and that she now loved unreservedly. Iris in a white dress with a sage green ribbon, toddling down the aisle with devastating seriousness, holding a basket of flower petals and frowning at anyone who tried to rush her. Standing at the altar looking at Ezra, at his steady eyes, his unhurried presence, the particular way he always seemed to take up exactly the right amount of space. Adira thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago in a hospital restroom, holding a paper towel and a secret and a fear so large it had no shape. She thought about what she'd believed back then, about what she'd thought love was supposed to look like, about all the times she had stayed quiet when she should have spoken, all the mornings she'd eaten cereal alone and told herself it was fine. She thought about everything she'd carried, and then she thought about this. Iris existed. She was here. She had her mother's stubborn set to her jaw and her grandfather's laugh, and she was the most extraordinary thing Adira had ever had anything to do with, this small, fierce person who had arrived in the middle of the hardest year of her life and made it the most important one. There are things that break you, and then there are things that build you back, bone by bone, into something stronger than you were. Sometimes they are the same thing. The officiant asked her to repeat after him. She looked at Ezra. He was smiling, that unhurried, unperformed smile she had come to know as one of the truest things about him. She didn't wait for the prompt. I already know, she said. I'll take care of you. You take care of me. And we figure the rest out together. Iris threw a fistful of flower petals into the air and everyone laughed, and it was imperfect and warm and exactly, completely right.